Yo, what's going on, guys? And today we'll be talking about my NBA free agency rumors and reports that we're hearing. So if you guys do enjoy any of this content, hit that like and subscribe button. Also, I think it looks right. Yeah. Let me know what you guys think of this new layout that I'm trying out. I think it looks good and I enjoy it. But let's get right into today's video and talk about basically what I wanted to speak about every single free agents transaction, and yeah, all the reports that we're hearing. So we're going to start off right here with the Sacramento Kings, as this is probably, I think, one of the more interesting reports. So let's get right into it. Like, comment, and subscribe if you're new here. So what are we reporting or talking about today? And that is the Sacramento Kings are allegedly interested in a man by the name of Mr. Russell Westbrook and Mr. Malcolm Brogdon. Of course, right here, I have the slides, I believe, backwards, as we're going to go all the way to the front. But the Sacramento Kings, as I go on the fly, according to reports, are interested in finding a point guard. Now, it seems like Tyus Jones is going to Orlando, with Russell Westbrook and Malcolm Brogdon potentially being the two guys available. I'd like to hear your guys' opinions in the comment section down below. What do you guys think of this report and why? I think the biggest thing for me is that I'd rather have Russell Westbrook health-wise, and I know he technically had a better three-point shooting season than Malcolm Brogdon did for the Washington Wizards this past year. However, I can understand that on paper, some might think someone like a Brogdon would be a better fit than Westbrook. However, the Kings do need a table setter, as by the end of last season, their only table setter was Markelle Fultz. That was like a true point guard. Now, Russell Westbrook averaged 13 points, 6 assists, on almost 5 rebounds per game, shooting 44% from the field and 32% from three. His three-point shot had some good months. Other months, it wasn't as good. Then Malcolm Brogdon only played 24 games this past year, and he's really had health and durability concerns over the past few seasons, and he averaged just under 13 points, 4 assists, and 4 rebounds almost on 43% from the field, but 28% from three. He had a rougher year shooting the basketball, and that is, I think, a room, an area for concern if you are a Kings fan bringing in Brogdon. If I had my druthers, I would obviously be choosing Westbrook just because of the reports showing that he could be healthy. And obviously, the dark horse right here that we're also going to talk about, and isn't going to be the prime guy, but it's Dennis Schroeder. It seems like they're trying to get Dennis Schroeder. Regardless, if they do or don't get Dennis Schroeder, they would like to bring one of Russell Westbrook or Malcolm Brogdon. Again, I'd rather have Schroeder and Westbrook. I could understand saying that it's going to be cheaper to bring in Schroeder and Mr. Brogdon, but obviously thinking that Schroeder is going to come here and be a part of this guy is going to be able to average like 14 and 7, even be like a borderline 10, I mean not 10, but 20 point per game scorer if he was really given the reins to do that. But if you look at the Kings, this is a team that's just under $170 million of committed salary currently. They don't have a true point guard. Zach LaVine, Malik Monk. Malik Monk's more suited to be a six-man playing the shooting guard position. Devin Carter's his only point guard, but he's young. Didn't play much his rookie year due to injury, and he still has to prove it. While DeMar DeRozan and Domantas Sabonis are their two best ball handlers, this is a team that having Schroeder, LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray, Sabonis be your starting lineup, then you have Malik Monk and let's say Russell Westbrook. That's your two guards off the bench. Throw in Nickeil Clifford, and all you have now is a hole at power forward, because I assume you're not going to play Terrence Davis and Nickeil Clifford there, and you need to bring somebody in from free agency. And you still have Maxime Renault and Jonas Valanciunas. Like, I think that's like an improvement on the roster. Again, this is all assuming that you're going to go out and get yourself a guy in the name of Dennis Schroeder, and then also bringing in Westbrook. I also think it'd be fine if you brought in Brogdon. I think Westbrook's the better defender, better player at this point in their career, and it seems like they're equally shaky three-point shooters. And to me, I think if you look at the Kings, yes, defense has been a problem. I think offense has been less of a problem, but I really do believe that this is a team that if they can solve the point guard position, they're not going to become contenders, but they can at least become more realistic playoff contenders that aren't actually going to have to go through the play-in to make it to the said playoffs. So that's the biggest thing for me. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think should happen if you're the wow, did not know what I said right there. If you were the Sacramento Kings. Now, Sacramento has been a team that's obviously they went all in on making the playoffs, but then they had short-sighted moves. So Scott Perry, the new general manager, and obviously newly taken off the label interim head coach turned head coach, Doug Christie, is a guy who emphasizes defense. And I think they have enough offensive players on this team that if you can really just fill out the defense, this is a lot better of a constructed roster than it had been in the past. So that's my 2 cents on that one. And I'd like to hear your guys's, if you guys agree with me on that. I definitely think it's an interesting one, to say the least, where bringing in Dennis Schroeder and hopefully, I mean, if you don't get Schroeder, bring in both Westbrook and Brogdon at that point. But if you can do Schroeder and Westbrook, I think that's a pretty decent turn of events. Now, let's move over to our next topic. And again, guys, if you guys have any thoughts regarding transactions or anything you'd like to see, I'm always down to hear your opinions, because this part of the offseason is the most interesting in my opinion, as everything's in flux. We think we hear things, but it's still all, fluid, and things could change on a whim. And to me, I think that's one of the more interesting facts about all of this, is that how teams are able to pivot and make moves. So to me, that's part of one of the more interesting things to look forward to as we progress in this offseason. So let's get right into the next topic, and that is going to be discussing, I love how this is supposed to be, I think, here we go. Is this the right one, or are we on the wrong? There we go. My apology, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about Clint Capela going to either the Spurs or the Lakers. Yes. There's also reports that I think maybe a team like the Knicks could be interested in him. But let's get right into the reports and why either of these teams would be interested in Clint Capela. Yes, Clint Capela is a little bit over the hill, you could say. He's a guy that his knees aren't what they used to be. He's still, I think, a good rebounding and finishing center, albeit as a backup. I don't think he should be someone that you want as a starter, due to the fact that I think he is a little old. Okay. And if you're trying to bring him in to be a part of a center by committee, I think that approach is actually the best version that a team like the Lakers or even the Spurs, I think, might be a better organization for him to go to, due to the fact that he's a guy that at this point in his career, it's not that like he's wrong, like bad, or isn't an impactful player, but here we'll read you what we saw my coworker Michael Scotto at hoopshype.com write. Following the Kristaps Porzingis trade, it seemed like Clint Capela's days were numbered. We already thought that this season, when he was an expiring contract that didn't get traded, that was rumored to be traded all year, he had been supplanted in the starting lineup by Onyeka Okongwu, who had gotten an extension. Now, the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Spurs, my apology, it wasn't the Knicks, it was the Clippers as the other one. They already have Zubac. Clint Capela would be a perfect backup guy who would come in and do the same thing that Zubac does, albeit at a lesser level. And then the Lakers, if they're going to keep, Christian Colocu, Trey Jemison, I don't know about Kleba, but they're kind of that like whole group that they have there in Los Angeles. And even if they bring back Jackson Hayes, Clint Capela could make a great insurance policy. While Victor Wembanyama, Clint Capela, and depending on if they keep a reserve big man or not, or bring somebody back in like a Bismack Biyombo or Sandro, is it Mamu? I can't say the rest of the last name, but could be, worthy. Now, this is a guy who averaged 8 and 8 last year on 56% from the field. And those numbers aren't bad, but for what he used to be, it isn't great. So we'll start with the Clippers. If you guys have not seen the Clippers currently, James Harden, Norman Powell, Kawhi Leonard. We got Derrick Jones at power forward, Zubac at center. They did draft, Yannick Conan Niederhauser. He might need a little bit of time because he might be too green behind the ears. So Clint Capela could be a good third guy. And Drew Eubanks is a non-guaranteed contract, as that means they'll probably waive him. And it's been reported that he's not expected to return. So right there, Clint Capela's an upgrade in your big man rotation. Then you have Kobe Brown, Pat Baldwin, Jordan Miller, Cam Christie, Kobe Sanders, Bogdan Bogdanovic, who they're expected to trade, Chris Dunn, and Seth Lundy. Now, Ben Simmons and Patty Mills, Amir Coffey, Nick Batum are all expected to return. Ben Simmons, I believe, is the least likely, and then probably Patty Mills and Amir Coffey are kind of like 50-50, but Nick Batum's a guaranteed to return. So with all that being said, who's the next team? Of course, it is everybody's favorite Los Angeles Lakers. I'm just kidding, guys. Some people hate the Lakers, but this is a team that with Maxi Kleber, Jared Vanderbilt, Trey Jemison being their true only big men, and Jemson's on a two-way with as well Jackson Hayes and Christian Koloko expected to come back. Koloko, Hayes is depending on how their center hunt goes. Clint Capela could be a bridge starter or a good backup for Jackson Hayes if he stays. I kind of like that, especially with Rui Hachimura, Dalton Connect, LeBron James all being your forwards, and then Jared Vanderbilt can play both, small ball 5 and be a power forward. I think the Lakers would benefit from this. I think the Clippers right now is the best fit just because you wouldn't be asking too much of him, or the Spurs, similar thing where, yes, he could be a starter, but at the same time, if you brought back Bismack Biyombo or Mamu or even Charles Bassey, those are all guys who can be center by committee with Clint Capela. And just imagine all the rebounding and plays you can get done with a guy like Mr. Clint Capela. I'm also like super salty that this is supposed to be, I don't know if you guys see this. I'm gonna fix this camera. I thought I'd crop this, but clearly was not properly cropped, and now you guys have been able to see me on the left right here. To fix this, we'll go, I think, 600. And wow, you would have thought that would have done a good enough job. Either way, as we continue this, if you guys are a fan of the Spurs, the Clippers, or the Lakers, who do you think would have been the right choice, in your opinion, to bring into this organization? As to me, I think the best choice would have been being able to choose maybe the Spurs or the Clippers. I think the Clippers are evidently the best one. You're not forcing Capela to be your starter. With the Spurs and the Lakers, depending on how the offseason goes, you might end up being forced to start Capela, and I just don't think Capela is a starter in the NBA anymore, and that's my biggest cause of concern right there. So that's my 2 cents on that one. Now, what do you guys think with the rest of the offseason? If you were a Clippers or a Lakers fan, two teams in Los Angeles that I think are trying to make moves, do you think there's an easy way to upgrade your team, or do you guys believe that this offseason is a difficult one? As I get, if you're a fan of the Clippers and you believe that you're close to contention, I think they're closer to contending than the Lakers are. So to me, let's roll with that and try to see if we can maximize what we've done this past year with one of the best defenses, and then having offensive players in Kawhi, Norman Powell, regardless if you keep him, and James Harden, I think gives you some, solid room for growth. And I think if you're a Clippers fan, be happy. It could be a worse situation as it has been previously. So let's go ahead and talk about this next team. And those are obviously the Detroit Pistons. The Detroit Pistons this year took the steps forward, but it seems like Dennis Schroeder isn't staying. Malik Beasley might have played his last NBA game with those allegations of point shaving, betting on ball games. And then Duncan Robinson is expected to return or be used in a sign and trade. Could be poached by the Detroit Pistons. And then there's Caris LeVert, who is also another guy that the Hawks hope to return. So before we start and continue, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section. What do you guys expect and why? If you're a Pistons fan, if Malik Beasley and Dennis Schroeder are gone, and Tim Hardaway is probably just going to get a little bit over the veteran minimum or the veteran minimum if he does return, what do you think of LeVert or Duncan Robinson? So where are these reports coming from? Well, these reports are coming from my colleague, Michael Scotto at hoopshype.com. So basically what is being said is that the Pistons, meanwhile, are likely to take a run at Duncan Robinson, who could suddenly fill their need if shooting, with Malik Beasley potentially gone. And then, of course, we told you that Caris LeVert is a guy that Sacramento, who was interested in Dennis Schroeder, the Pistons are interested in Caris LeVert, who's projected to get a 2-year, $30 million deal, which is about $15 million annually. Caris LeVert averaged 12 points, 3.5 assists, and 3 rebounds a game on 64 appearances, shooting 46% from the field and 37% from 3. Duncan Robinson averaged 11 points, 2.5 assists, 2.5 rebounds, 74 games, on 43% from the field and 39% from three. As you guys see, I think both players give you shooting. One's more of like a herky-jerky type of guy that I believe, looking at someone along the lines of Duncan Robinson, might be a bit better suited for what the Pistons need, as he's a guy who doesn't need the ball in his hand, does a good job of, coming in, whether it's starting or off the bench, whether having a rhythm or not. I think is a bit impactful part of all of this. And again, if Malik Beasley and Dennis Schroeder are gone, we don't even know with Malik, and Simone Fontecchio could be moved, but he might be someone they have to keep who's a good shooter. They right now have Jalen Duren. Bobby Klintman is kind of like a switch big. Isaiah Stewart. Then their power forwards are Tobias Harris and Simone Fontecchio. That's the thing with Duncan Robinson, is he played the 2-3 and even small ball 4. They have Ausar Thompson, Ron Holland. They have themselves Marcus Sasser, Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham, Chaz Lanier, Ron Harper Jr., and Tolu Smith. As we mentioned before, it was expected that Beasley and Schroeder were going to probably come back, but it seems like now that may not happen. And Tim Hardaway Jr., you'd assume would be a minimum or a little bit over the minimum, not too much, maybe barely costing you part of your mid-level exception. I think if you can get a guy like Duncan Robinson, he's probably cheaper than $15 million a year. He might be closer to 12. Now, some people might be saying, then why did he decline that $19 million deal? Well, he probably declined $19 million deal knowing that he's probably going to get a 3 to 4 year deal making $10 million a year. So you take the guaranteed money instead of just the 1 year money in this scenario. And I think with a team like Detroit, Duncan Robinson is able to play alongside Jaden Ivey or Cade Cunningham or Ausar Thompson or Tobias Harris. Same thing with Simone Fontecchio, Ron Holland, and Marcus Sasser. While I think Caris LeVert, he's more of a guy you want off the bench. He needs the ball a bit more in his hand. And not saying that they won't fit, but Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey and Ausar Thompson with Caris LeVert becomes a bit more complicated, where you realize, okay, Caris LeVert's probably going to be relegated just to a 6th-man role. While if you're looking at Duncan Robinson, he can legit be either a 6-man, a starter, your 10th guy. He gives you a lot more luxury in terms of how you can use him as a utility shooter rather than just a scorer off the bench. And he does not need the ball whatsoever in his hand. I think that there plays a larger, fact into what could happen. And by the way, seems like Deron Sharp's off the menu, and seemingly Colin Gillespie. So there are multiple teams going after their own free agents, and this year's free agency might be a little bit calmer, or not as many big trades or signings as you expect, and working around the margins. And I think a deal like a Duncan Robinson, even a Caris LeVert, even though I'm more privy to the Duncan Robinson deal for Detroit, as we saw that having guys who don't need the ball in their hand and can be shooters clearly was way more impactful for Cade Cunningham than I think a guy like Caris LeVert, who kind of takes the ball out of both Cade and Jaden's hands. So that's just my thoughts on that one. I want to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you guys think and why about this one? What do you think should happen if you were the GM, Trajan Langdon? I think also Duncan Robinson fits JB Bickerstaff's coaching style, which is just gritty and hard-nosed. And I think it would just be a better fit all in all right there holistically. Now, to take a sip of water, I do think when you look at all of this is that it's an interesting setup. If you're a Pistons fan, especially with like how everything's gone this year. By the way, if you're watching, thank you for watching. I'm just checking the chat now. And is there any real trade idea about Milwaukee? Now, it's going to be a little bit difficult for Milwaukee to do any trades. We do have a Deandre Ayton video. We talked about Milwaukee maybe being interested in that. It just becomes difficult for them to do any deal that doesn't involve moving Kyle Kuzma, more than likely. And Pat Connaughton's the other guy, but Pat doesn't have any value. And the whole reason you're moving Kyle Kuzma is because Pat doesn't have any value. So that becomes difficult, as someone in the chat's asking if there's any way of a realistic deal for Milwaukee to make to be a trade. So it's difficult, guys. It's difficult for a team like Milwaukee to do something along those lines. Now, with that being said, could they pull something out of their butt? Yeah, I mean, that's part of the NBA experience. teams are able to do whatever. So let's get into the next one. All right, guys. Of course, we got to talk about the point guard, Chris Paul, and that is the Clippers, the Hornets, the Mavericks. The Suns are interested in Chris Paul. Yeah, the Clippers arguably need a true point guard, and he could be a six-man or start alongside James Harden and Kawhi Leonard and Norman Powell, as Kawhi then would probably play power forward. Hornets, he would be their six-man. This is a team that seemingly is trying to make a playoff push, just bring in veterans, follow what the Detroit Pistons did. Dallas legitimately needs a bridge point guard, and I think Dallas, the Clippers, and the Suns are the three teams that work best. I don't know if you'd go to Phoenix. I mean, Phoenix is probably interested because they need a point guard. He's the best point guard that they could get at regarding the restrictions that they have without having to move much. You can just sign there probably for the minimum. And this is what I'm thinking, minimum, maybe part of the mid-level exception at most. But if he's really wanting opportunity, the Clippers, the Mavericks, and the Suns, if the Hornets are willing to give out, dole out some money, I could see that being the landing spot. But if you guys had your own druthers, tell me in the comments down below, what do you think of Chris Paul? Is he still an impactful player? Would you trade for him, and why? I'd like to hear what you have to say. By the way, like and subscribe for more content like this. Work for hoopshype.com, and we make content like this on the daily. Now, I think the biggest thing people need to understand is when you look at this report is that Steinlein has said that Dallas hopes to make a free agent run with Chris Paul. Obviously, we know that they're targeting D'Angelo Russell, and it seems that Mavericks believe Russell's far more attainable. However, Paul does not appear to be interested in spending another season in Texas with his children both being teenagers in South California. Hence why I think the Mavericks and Hornets are going to be more if they throw money at him. And he's like, yeah. But I do believe the Clippers or the Suns, probably the two best. The Suns are a short flight away from Los Angeles, while the Clippers, being a team he previously played for, also being where his kids are currently located, is a big reason why I think he has interest in either of those teams. And we mentioned it before, James Harden, Norman Powell, Kawhi Leonard, that can all shift up, shooting guard, small forward, power forward. Then you have Zubac. You move Derrick Jones Jr. off the bench with Chris Dunn and Bogdanovich, Kobe Brown, Jordan Miller. Now you have Chris Paul starting, and you can even have Chris Paul come off the bench, but I think Chris Paul, you probably want to start at that point because he being impactful. You have Yannick Conan Niederhauser. You can clear $4.75 million of cap space by waiving the non-guaranteed contract of Drew Eubanks, which is expected. And this would allow you not to need to bring back Patty Mills or Ben Simmons, even though bringing those two back would be luxuries. Same thing with Amir Coffey. The expectation is Nick Batum is returning. And they have Kobe Sanders, Cam Christie, Seth Lundy, and Kobe Brown and Pat Baldwin, who are all young guys that could take step forwards. That bringing in like Chris Paul is just going to create high efficient looks for those guys to thrive. Now, if we move over to the Hornets, they just traded for Colin Sexton, basically getting a second-round pick, and Colin Sexton for Jusuf Nurkic, as the Jazz wanted some depth, while the Hornets, they're going to run their guys, probably go hunting for a big man, but really cool with the big guys that they have and just trying to get some veteran presence with Colin Sexton. And Sexton's more of a combo guard with point guard-like skills, so bringing in Chris Paul will allow you to have a guy run the second unit, be an insurance policy for LaMelo, can play with LaMelo as they'll force LaMelo to play off ball. And now with LaMelo, Nipple, Miles Bridges, Brandon Miller, your centers right now either Moussa Diabate or a Ryan Kalkbrenner, with Tajon Saloon being also one of their bigs. They're probably going to bring back Trey Mann, I'm assuming, and KJ Simpson, so that you could benefit there. You have Ozzie Mizic, Nick Smith, Daquan Jeffries, Sion James, and my boy Liam McNeely and Josh Okogie. So this is actually a team that's got some length, defense, and a lot of shooting that Chris Paul can set up if he were to be brought there. Now we go over to the Mavericks. This is seemingly, if they don't get D'Angelo Russell and they need to pay, outside of Jaden Hardy and Brandon Williams, there is no point guard there. So they might bring back Spencer Dinwiddie, Dante Exum. There hasn't been like a bunch of reporting on that. Your assumption is they would. Still, you would like to have a guy like Chris Paul, even if you were to get D'Angelo Russell, just because it will allow you to have multiple options until Kyrie comes back, if he does come back this year. And I think all those guys can play next to Cooper Flag, Anthony Davis, Derek Lively, PJ Washington, Najee Marshall. I don't know what's going to happen with Omax and Dwight Powell, but those are all guys that I think that can, work together, and that's a big thing. The Suns have had a point guard hole since they traded, and they're expected to keep traded for KD and Bradley Beal, and they're expected to keep Jalen Green. So Jalen Green and Devin Booker can play the shooting guard and small forward. You move Dylan Brooks, I guess, to power forward. Ryan Dunn comes off the bench. Mark Williams, starting center. Come on, Malawach is backup with Nick Richards. Nick Richards could be flipped. We're hearing about that. Rasheer Fleming can play power forward and center. They also have Oso Iguodaro, who can still help them out. They brought back Colin Gillespie. They got shooting in Cody Brea, and Grayson Allen is still there, and so is Bradley Beal. So bringing Chris Paul can really maximize this roster and the players that are there, in my opinion, by bringing in a Chris Paul who basically was the coach when Monty Williams was there and helped lead them to the finals in multiple deep playoff runs. So to me, that one does make sense and could be a minimum contract that they would be interested in bringing in. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think should happen and why? If you made it to the end of the video, hit that like and subscribe button. I do definitely think that Chris Paul being available for any of these teams could be huge, as all of these teams would benefit bringing him in. What do you guys think and why about a Mr. Chris Paul coming in? Look, it would be Lob City 2.0. The Pistons can sign out Santi Aldama, man. It just would cost money, and it just wouldn't be like an easy deal for people to do. But if the Pistons were really wanting to do it, I mean, they were gearing up to make an offer to Naz Reid. I wouldn't be surprised if the Pistons go for Santi Aldama. And we made a video previously discussing Santi Aldama going to the Pistons. Now, I think he's going to be a guy that the Grizzlies are enticed to keep, but he really could be someone who ends up getting priced out due to the fact that he might be a bit too rich for what they want to pay him. And that's nothing against him. That's just how the market plays out, because he's a guy that I really think his game could scale up, and a lot of people probably see that and have no problem taking said flyer on him. So yeah, let me hear your guys' thoughts on that one. I definitely think it's an interesting situation with Santi Aldama. But today we'll be talking about some trade news. Oh, there's some trade news. Yeah, coming out of Phoenix. The Lakers, the Pacers, and the Knicks are interested in Nick Richards. Yes. This is a report coming from, I believe, my colleague Michael Scotto at hoopshype.com. Hit that button down below in the description. Should be linked his work, the latest notebook that we released. And while you're there, comment, what do you think? Which team should go after this guy? He's a solid like 7-7 guy off the bench, can be a double-double guy starting, and shouldn't cost you too much. I'd like to hear what you have to say. And if you made it so far in the video, it seems like you should like and subscribe. It'll help out the channel a ton. Now, I'd like you to hear your opinions on this new setup that I have going right here with like the slideshows and everything. I actually think it looked kind of good, right? But no. What we got going right here is an opportunity for all three of these teams to get a backup center that they've kind of needed. And what do I mean by this? Well, Mark Williams and Kaman Mawach are already there, and so is Oso Iguodaro. Richards is on a $5 million non-guaranteed salary and is expected to be guaranteed by the Suns, but they're looking at trading him. It's not that they're going to trade him. They're dangling him in trade talks, and I think the Lakers, the Pacers, and the Knicks. The Pacers and Knicks are probably looking as him to be legit backup options, because if they were able to trade Mitchell Robinson, Nick Richards would be a great replacement. Pacers have needed a backup center, and they're expected to bring back Miles Turner. So if you're able to do this, you get a quality backup, which we've talked about since last year, one of the better backups. This is a guy who last year in 22 minutes per game while starting 43 of 57 games between the Hornets and Suns, averaged 9 points and 8 rebounds a game while blocking 1 block a game. And he's a guy who per 36 is averaging a double-double. So let's go through, talk about all three teams. I think the Lakers look at Nick Richards as a backup option to be their starting center if they strike out on any better centers. So Nick Richards to the Pacers, how would this work, or how would this look? I don't think Enrique Freeman's coming back. They would bring Thomas Bryant back, but if they get Nick Richards, I think they're fine letting Thomas Bryant walk. They kept Tony Bradley, from my understanding, Pascal Siakam, Aaron Nesmith, Obi Toppin, Andrew Nembhard, TJ McConnell, Ben Shepherd, Johnny Furphy, Obi Toppin, Ray J. I don't know if they'll keep Ray J. Dennis, but I like Ray J. Dennis. It seems like they do too. Cam Jones and Taylor Peter were their 2 draft picks this year, while also Tyrese Halliburton's expected to miss the entire year or most of it due to that torn Achilles. And if you look at bringing in a guy like Nick Richards behind Miles Turner, Nick Richards is an upgrade of Tony Bradley. Now you got 3 centers deep. Kind of makes them a bit more menacing after having Isaiah Jackson and both James Wiseman. Last year's backup centers popped their Achilles what felt like a week apart from each other. As I mentioned earlier, Maxi Kleber and Gabe Vincent are the 2 salaries that they are most likely to trade. Maxi Kleber being the more than likely one, as he barely played for them. Imagine Nick Richards being the starting center if they strike out on everybody. They're expected to bring back Koloku, Jackson Hayes if they can't get somebody. If they can bring back Hayes and have Nick Richards and Koloku and Jared Vanderbilt and then trade Jemison on a two-way, I don't think that's that bad of a center rotation, kind of center by committee that I can live with next to Duthiero and Dalton Connect, LeBron James, Rui Hachimura. It's not bad size there next to their forwards. Then you have Austin Reeves, Gabe Vincent, Ronnie James, Shake Milton, Jordan Goodwin, Luka Doncic. They're expected to lose Dorian Finney-Smith is the report. So I wonder how that's all going to go down now that, you know, Dorian's gone. I think they'll have a bit more spending room and a bit more of a luxury to play with, but they're still, it might be able to keep Dorian Finney-Smith, but it's just being reported that they aren't going to be able to. Now, the rest of the team, if we're looking at Nick Richards to the Knicks, Precious Achiuwa is not expected to return. Landry Shamet might return. I do believe that Marjon Beauchamp and Kevin McCullough are both expected to return. They did bring back Errol Huckborty, and right now their front court is Diawara, if he isn't stashed, Errol Huckborty, Mitchell Robinson, and Karl-Anthony Towns. Trading for Nick Richards would allow you to trade Mitchell Robinson, who's had some injury concerns, and then obviously Deuce McBride, Pacome, and Tyler Kolek make up the bench that they're still trying to build back up after all these trades. And, you know, look at all their free agents. They have Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, and Karl-Anthony Towns. Again, Nick Richards can play alongside Karl-Anthony Towns or come off the bench and be the rim protector that they've needed, as last year having, you know, Mitchell Robinson out for most of the year wasn't the most was more counterintuitive than helping with their team's rim protection, as they were one of the worst interior defenses in the league. So we made it to the end of the video. If you're a fan of either of these teams, I'm not giving up anything more than second round picks, maybe a young guy, if I'm not trying to give up second round picks, due to the fact that he went for second round picks in the original trade. And if anything, his value's gone lower because he does not have a remaining year on his deal and he's an expiring one. That's my 2 cents on that one. And I'd like to hear your thoughts. Which team is most likely to go for him? And I think it is the Lakers. If they strike out on everybody else, you go ahead and you get yourself a guy like Nick Richards. Lemon water. Stay hydrated, friends. It's important. Well, what would you do and why? I think it's definitely interesting if you pull up and you see all the teams that could or may not be available. As I like the options for a team like Los Angeles, but at the same time, I understand if you're a team like Los Angeles and you don't want Nick Richards to be your first choice, because that makes a ton of sense. He should not be any team that actually has legitimate aspirations to be a championship contender first choice at the center position, especially in free agency. But this is a weak free agency, so they could really just be trying to get whatever they can get at this point, and I don't blame them. All right, I don't blame them, as kind of seems like how the cards have been dealt. Now, by the way, we talked about somebody who plays for the Lakers in this video just recently. The interesting part about it is the fact that that said player is expected not to return. Now, who was that player? Well, we were talking about Dorian Finney-Smith in the Nick Richards video, and that's because Dorian Finney-Smith is not expected to return. Yes, it is being reported that the Rockets are interested in Dorian Finney-Smith, and right now it seems like they're the front runners. I mean, there could be other teams, but it seems like they're the team that has the money and the ability to do so, and I'm not surprised by this by any point. They've wanted more wing defense. They just traded away Dillon Brooks, and Dorian Finney-Smith is like equal, if not maybe a little bit of an upgrade on Dillon Brooks. Now, Houston still has the full non-taxpayer mid-level exception, and a lot of people thought they'd go after a Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but that would probably put them over the luxury tax, and it seems that Dorian Finney-Smith could be cheaper, and I wouldn't mind having a Dorian Finney-Smith. Dorian Finney-Smith averaged just under 9 points, 4 rebounds, and 1.5 assists in 63 games this season on 44% from the field and 41% from three. Pretty solid numbers from a guy who can play small forward and power forward, even small ball center. He can guard 1 through 5. He is one of the better 3-and-D wing forwards in the league, and he's someone was a coveted player for the Lakers that I still think there's a dark horse chance, you know, a snowball's chance in hell that he does return to Los Angeles. He doesn't return to Los Angeles if they're really just going to give him the full meta level exception, or part of it. I think it's going to be a 3-year, $30 million deal with $10 million average annual valuation. Now, Fred VanVleet, Amen Thompson, Kevin Durant, Jabari Smith, Alperen Şengün, Aaron Holiday, and Reed Shepherd, and Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason, Steven Adams, Genius Williams, and Jock Landale are all guys that we know are on this roster currently. But Landale's expected to be waived. He's got a non-guaranteed contract. Probably same thing with Nate Williams. So if you can bring in yourself Dorian Finney-Smith, who would then come off the bench, probably as your sixth guy in this rotation currently, with Dorian Finney-Smith, then it'd probably be, we know that Cam Whitmore's being discussed in trade, so he could stay or not, but it'd probably be Dorian Finney-Smith, Tari Eason, and Aaron Holiday. Probably Tari Eason, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Steven Adams, then Aaron Holiday is your 9-man rotation. That's behind the current guys if you don't bring back any of your free agents, which, they're expected to bring back a lot of the free agents. So to me, this is the biggest thing where, this is a deep team where you got a two-way guy who fits Ime Udoka's coaching style, and as well as a Rockets team that, if I remember correctly, I'm going to pull up their stats right here just so I don't get misquoted or I misquote them. But they're a team that, yes, they could score, but they weren't like an elite three-point shooting team, especially for what would be held to Ime Udoka's standards. They were the 10th worst three-point attempt team. They were 8th in three-point makes and 9th in three-point percentage. And even on the year, they were the 6th worst in true shooting. So this is a team that, for being number 1 in offensive rebounds, they were not giving themselves enough opportunities to get back up there and create. And that's a big problem, especially if you're trying to win basketball games. So bringing in Dorian Finney-Smith is going to give you a bona fide three-point shooter who can consistently be a 40% guy who can start or come off the bench, which if he starts, you probably push Amen Thompson or Jabari Smith to the bench. But, he's going to be a guy who opens up the floor for Kevin Durant, Jabari Smith, Şengün, Amen Thompson, Fred VanVleet, whoever you name it, is going to benefit from a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith, who is a great point of attack defender. As we mentioned, can guard multiple positions, still a solid three-point shooter, going to give you double-digit scoring in almost every game, can even be a small ball 5 that'll help you in transition. But for a team that is as bad as a three-point shooting team as this one is, they're going to benefit tremendously from bringing in a guy like a Dorian Finney-Smith, in my opinion. So that's where I'd like to hear your guys' opinions in the comments section. What do you guys expect and why for this? And do you guys think a team like the Houston Rockets should be interested in Dorian Finney-Smith? As I do think they quite possibly could be one of the best fits for a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith. But that's basically it. And again, I think it'd be like a 3-year, $30 million deal, $10 million annual average. Now, I do want to talk about the Cam Whitmore stuff that we kind of touched on a little bit right there. And that is, let's pull it up right here. I just want to pull up the roster. As, sometimes it feels like when you're trying to go back or, damn, I thought it'd be way, all right, there we go. We'll just go ahead and restart this and just put it back up here. But let me hear your thoughts so far. Do you think the Rockets so far have had the best offseason? I think there could be a case to be made that they've had one of the best offseasons this year. So we're going to go ahead and just talk about the Rockets real quickly and the Cam Whitmore reports, just because I think it'll be an interesting little video to discuss on. But I thought I'd made a slide for this one, but clearly I did not. Cam Whitmore is being discussed in trades according to my guy at Hoops Hype, where I work, USA Today Sports, hoopshype.com. Michael Scotto is reporting that, yes, Cam Whitmore is being included in trade discussions by the Houston Rockets. So before we continue, I'd like to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. What do you think and why is the fact that Mr. Cam Whitmore could be on the move? Personally, I think it's more so along the lines of a player like Cam. You don't want to figure out the extension, and his representation is probably wanting them to send him to a team that will figure out his extension and give him more opportunity, as I think he doesn't fit the team's timeline, even though he's been a part of this team for a few seasons. So the exact report is going like this. Houston Rockets swingman Cam Whitmore has drawn trade interest from the Chicago Bulls and the Denver Nuggets, among others, and this was, of course, before the Isaac Okoro acquisition. To me, if it's Chicago, they would probably eat his salary or send a salary that is a non-guaranteed that a team like the Rockets would be able to get off of. Now, Cam Whitmore, what has he done so far in his career? He's a high-scoring, a guy who I think could play the big two, the three. He's more suited at the three and even small ball four. And so far in his career, this is someone who's had 2 NBA seasons. This was his second year in the NBA. In 98 games, 5 starts, he's averaged 45% from the field almost, while shooting 4 3-point attempts on 35.7% from 3, averaging just under 11 points per game, just under an assist a game, 3.5 assists a night with a little over half a steal a game. Now, last year, he did average 9.5 points in comparison to 12.3, but his shooting percentages were basically the same. But one thing I did want to point out was his per 36, again, was greater last year, but he was still, again, per 36, a 20-point per game scorer, about 21 this year, 24 last year. And if you're the Bulls, all right, the Bulls' salary currently, I think they would be the team that probably has the most assets to give up something. I think if you're the Rockets and you're talking to the team that I believe that could be interested in the Denver Nuggets, it's probably Peyton Watson, maybe Darius Saric thrown in there for monetary reasons, and then they would cut Darius Saric. But if this is the Bulls actually being interested in Aaron Holiday, what would that take? Man, there isn't really a salary that I think they would just cut. I mean, they could just be looking at like Dalen Terry or Javon Carter or Ayo DeSumo, which if I'm the Rockets, if I send you Cam Whitmore, you send me Ayo DeSumo and some second round picks, I think that's a win. Even if it's Stick Smith, I think that's a win and something that could really help this team right now. Now, if you're trying to find a young guy to replace him with that could give you some upside, I think that is a Payne Watson, who you would just do a Payne Watson for Cam Whitmore swap. Yeah, Payne Watson costs a little bit more, but Payne Watson has like a little bit of Aaron Gordon rim protection, weak side rim protection in his game, can be a 1-4 defender who has some offensive scoring chops, where Payne Watson over the last few seasons has been a guy who has averaged, I know this year was a little bit different than the year before, but this year he averaged 8 points a game in his third season, and he shot 47% from the field, 35% from 3, best year in terms of shooting numbers. And if you look at his per 36, I know those aren't like a great indicator of like how they'll scale up, but it gives you at least an idea of what could potentially be possible. And someone averages about 12 points a game. That's for his average and for this past season. 2 assists a night, about 6 rebounds a game and a steal a night, but 2 blocks. He's like one of the better, shot blocking wings in the NBA. And that's something that I think a team like the Rockets would really like. And the only other assets that I think, again, it could just be picks, but I think the only other assets would be either a Deron Holmes, a Julian Strawther, or a package of Jalen Pickett and Hunter Tyson. I doubt it's Zeke Nnaji or Darius Saric. As much as the Denver Nuggets would like for that to happen, I doubt that would be what would. So if you're a fan of the Rockets, do you want a first-round pick, or do you think you get a first-round pick for a Cam Whitmore, or do you think that'd be a little bit difficult given how he's developed, and just because teams know that they probably do have to move him, and that's part of the reason why you wouldn't be giving up a first-round pick for a guy like him, even though he has the capabilities of being a 20-point-per-game scorer. Now, why did he fall in the draft? His knees are bow-legged or similar. Like, the way I was told was the likelihood of him being a player who reaches his second contract or finishes his second contract as a productive player was the probability due to his knees was less likely than most organizations would want. So that is the T on that. Now, as we continue our marathon right here, going through everything in the draft or in the free agency reports, let's talk the Nickeil Alexander-Walker deal that's, being reported. Yes, Nickeil Alexander-Walker could be someone who's on the move. We do have to add a couple teams that I forgot, and that was, of course, I think they're saying the Miami Heat now are in this deal, according to John Krasinski, and one more team that we'll pull up right here. I just saw it as we were scrolling through on my feed. Yeah, we'll include this. I didn't make, obviously, slides for them because this came out after we started this video, but still worth it. Now, let's talk about Nickeil Alexander-Walker. who's going to be a guy that a lot of people, if you didn't know, is a hot commodity. He was probably going to get the full mid-level exception. So what is the report? We're going to add the Heat, the Bucks, the Pistons, the Hawks, the Clippers, and the Raptors are all interested in Nickeil Alexander-Walker. So tell me down below why teams should be interested. What could he do? And should they make this move? It's been reported after I started, making this, that Nickeil Alexander-Walker was a player that the Miami Heat and the Bucks are monitoring. Quote, the Wolves do have a few young guys in Terrence Shannon Jr., Jalen Clark, and Rob Dillingham, who teams believes will step up as Nickeil Alexander-Walker should be on the move. The Hawks, the Bucks, the Clippers, Detroit, and the Heat are all interested. Detroit's kind of like pulled out, and we kind of talked on it earlier. They've kind of pivoted more towards a Caris LeVert, Duncan Robinson, so that's why he's not included in this list. So, real quickly, how would this all go down, and does it make sense? Now, it makes sense in the sense that with the report right here we have is Nickeil Alexander-Walker being a guy that I think a lot of teams would like. He can play the 2, the 3. He's a 3-and-D guy who gets hot. He can scale up. He can scale down. And that's a big thing you want in the NBA. Now, to be honest, I think if you look, the Hawks would be a perfect organization for him. I think he would fit in really well. And so would the Raptors, the Clippers, and the Pistons. Now, we do know the Pistons, Duncan Robinson, Caris LeVert has kind of pushed that to the side. The Heat would like him, especially with Davion Mitchell coming back, and Duncan Robinson could be a sign and trade guy. I think he's someone to keep an eye out for, to be replaced by Nickeil Alexander-Walker, just because he fits what the team would want to do now. And Milwaukee, it'd have to be a sign and trade with Pat Connaughton. I don't know what young guy they would include, but tell me down below how you would do that. Now, moving forward with the Atlanta Hawks, I think they're an interesting organization that Nickeil Alexander would legitimately be their 6th man. I know they're trying to bring, and I think he would be the upgrade, and Caris LeVert would be in the insurance policy if they don't get Nickeil Alexander-Walker to come here. I know Nickeil Alexander-Walker is looking for a $15-30 million deal. Nas probably looking at 3 years, 45, or Caris is 2 years, 30, 3 years, 45 for Nickeil. And I know Clint's not coming back. Larry might come back. Same thing with Garrison Matthews and Keem Wallace. But with Onyeka Okongwu, Mo Gay, Kristaps Porzingis, Jalen Johnson, Zachary Reshape, Dyson Daniels, Trae Young, Kobe Buffkin, Vit Krejci, having Nickeil Alexander-Walker be your 6th man before we hit Larry Nance, if he comes back, Vit Krejci, Onyeka Okongwu, if he's not starting next to Kristaps Porzingis, because I also see a world where you could say, oh, maybe we move Jalen Johnson to power forward, shooting guard is Zachary Reshape, small forward Jalen Johnson, power forwards Porzingis, center is Okongwu, and you have Mo Gay and whoever you bring in, like a Mason Plumlee in free agency, that could make that really work. And I think that, if that goes down, would be a very interesting lineup. And to me, I think a lot of this goes down by some of this being more so regarding interesting fit-wise, because I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker furthers this championship aspiration that the Hawks have started to develop, which, if you're a Hawks fan, this is huge news, because it feels like for the last few years they had been withering around, but Ansi Saul is doing a good job of building this organization up, and I think that is evident with their pursuit of Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Nickeil Alexander-Walker kind of has been replaced by Duncan Robinson and Caris LeVert for the Detroit Pistons, but they are still a team that's rumored there. I mean, Nickeil Alexander-Walker would be their 6th man. He could or start in front of Asar Thompson or over Jaden Ivey if Jaden Ivey were to be moved. He fits with Tobias Harris, and he fits with Jalen Duren. He fits with this team that they need a lot of spacing. They need shooters, guys who operate without the ball in their hand and play defense. That's what JB Bickerstaff likes, and that's kind of like what Trajan Langdon, their head of basketball operations, is trying to build the team's identity. 2-way players who surround Cade Cunningham and don't need the ball necessarily in their hands. Now, the Clippers would be a team that would love Nickeil Alexander-Walker, especially if they can move off of Bogdanovic. He would take those minutes, and he would really be their 6th man with Chris Dunn, Bogdanovic, and either a Yannick Conan Niederhauser or whoever the heck it may be. And then Patty Mills, Nick Batum, and maybe Ben Simmons and Amir Coffey come back. But you could really end up having one of the stronger benches in the league if you were the Clippers by bringing in Nickeil Alexander-Walker, because he would slot in as that 6-man role. They bring back Batum, Derek Jones Jr., or Batum would come off the bench alongside him and Chris Dunn. And then you have either Yannick Conan Niederhauser or Clint Capela as your other big man behind Zubac. Now you're looking at the Clippers like a legit contender. And I think a team people might have a little bit of fear. Well, you look over here, this is the Toronto Raptors. Nickeil Alexander-Walker would help a team that Grady Dick had a really streaky year shooting the ball. Ochai Agbaji's is kind of like an undersized forward, and Colin Murray-Boyles can't really shoot. Same thing with Mogbo. Jamal Shed can shoot, but it's not like at a high clip. So bringing in Nickeil Alexander-Walker would allow you to have a lot more shooting with RJ Barrett and Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes all being somewhat shaky shooters. So you would come in and have like a legit bona fide sharpshooter. That is something that I think this team definitely needs and has been looking for, to say the least. And I mean, to me, looking at Toronto right there, they're probably one of the teams that would benefit the most from Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker, out of all the teams that we've spoken about so far, which would raise their ceiling the most, it would probably be the Clippers, because they would then have one of the best benches in the entire NBA. So to me, I think that's definitely the most interesting part about this, as we mentioned all those teams. Now, one of the biggest things I think about this is we've talked about, the Hawks, the Bucks, the Clippers, the Pistons, the Heat, and the thing that I think gets maybe lost in translation in all of this is that Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a fantastic basketball player. And this is someone that, this past year, stats-wise, I just want to pull up his numbers. He was someone who averaged 9.5 points, 3 assists, and just under 3 rebounds and just under 3 assists a game. Last year was 8 points, 2.5 assists, 2 rebounds a night. And back in his days with New Orleans, this is where he was really let loose, and Chris Finch was his assistant coach down there for 1 or I think 2 years. This is a guy, he shot 36% as a rookie, but that second year where he shot 42% on almost 11 points a game. And then the following season where he was traded from New Orleans to Utah, and Utah, he was a guy who didn't get the ball as much, but in New Orleans, man, he was, that season before they traded him, he was shooting 31% on 6 threes a game. But the fact that he was willing to put those numbers up, I think really just show a guy who can be a volume scorer. And he just had to go through the motions of learning how to play in the NBA before he could become an impactful player that he is now. And I think those growing pains have obviously gone. Now, I hope I didn't lag right there, but yeah, let me know, what do you guys think of this one so far? I definitely think organizationally, this is a player that a lot of teams want, for the fact that he can play without the ball in his hands. He can help space the floor. He'll defend. He'll create as a secondary facilitator a little bit. So those are the type of guys that you really want at the NBA level. And I understand why all of these teams are interested in a Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and why he's kind of like the prize free agent in a weak free agent class. So that's kind of my whole 2 cents on a Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Let me hear your thoughts on that one. Now, I did think that Nickeil Alexander-Walker could get overpaid, and then people betray him, in the sense that they're going to be like, oh, he got way too much money. You definitely shouldn't have gotten that much. And you're just like, damn, bro, but you guys wanted this. Now let's talk about what I believe actually is the last video that we're going to do right here. And this is on Tyus Jones. Yes, big old Tyus Jones. I actually really like Tyus Jones, to the point that I think he got a bad stick with the whole thing that happened with the Wizards, and then obviously the Suns. But someone that I think has at least decent respect around the league and people enjoy character-wise. So, Orlando, they made moves this offseason. And for a while, I'd been told that they were interested in Tyus Jones. That came from Eric Pincus. I know that at some point there was a fear that they were not going to be able to get him. But yes, Tyus Jones is someone that the Orlando Magic are interested in. I'd like to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. What do you think of a Tyus Jones? Do you think he's the type of player that can help raise the floor, elevate the ceiling for a Orlando squad that hopes to, stop being one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the league and take that next step to contention? And Tyus Jones really could be a player that helps them off the bench. So I'd like to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. What do you think of the idea of a Tyus Jones coming to Orlando? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Subscribe and like this video if you do enjoy It'll help out the channel a ton. Now, the report that we're hearing right now exactly is it's believed that Orlando is going to decline Mo Wagner and Caleb Houston. Now, it's expected that both of those guys could come back, but that is due to the fact that they're going to bring, if they were to come back, they'd be brought back on smaller financial commitment, and they want to create financial wiggle room. This is all salary cap gymnastics, basically what we're explaining, to bring in Tyus Jones without becoming, an apron team or second apron team. And they've been connected to Tyus Jones for several years now, if you guys haven't been following the franchise. And Tyus Jones is a guy that, if I pulled down, I thought I had his stats written down, but I'm pretty sure he shot, 44% from the field? That's off the dome, by the way. We're going to pull it off. He averaged 10 points this year, which is last year he averaged 12. He dished out 5.3 assists. The year before he dished out 7.3. And he did shoot 44% from the field. Look at me, ladies and gentlemen. And it seems like his three-point percentage this past year, not as consistent as it had been, like 41.4%, but like his volumes and his numbers and stuff, like it wasn't the same as it had been in years prior. And to me, I really do believe that he's one of the better guards in the league. And as a starter, he only started 58 games for the Phoenix Suns as he played in 81. So 23 of them were not starts. And he was someone who, in starts, averaged 11.6 assists, just under a steal a game, never turning the ball over, shooting 42% on 5 threes a game, and 45% from the field. As well as someone, let me just see, was he better? Yeah, he basically got benched or moved to the bench post All-Star break. As pre-All-Star break, he was a starter regularly. Now, he would probably be the third guy behind Anthony Black and Jalen Suggs, and ahead of Jace Richardson, son of Jason Richardson, and Jet Howard. Then they would have, obviously, starting line at Suggs, Bane, Franz Wagner, Paulo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr., then Goga Bitadze, Jonathan Isaac, Tristan Da Silva. It would probably be Tyus Jones and Anthony Black. You would then have Jace Richardson, Jet Howard, Noah Penda. I don't think Corey Joseph, Trevlin Queen, Gary Harris are coming back. I would expect Caleb Houston and Mo Wagner, because power forward and center, come back. Matt McClung could come back. They have his restricted free agency, but at the same time, I think Matt McClung's at this point looking for that said team that's going to give him opportunity to actually play. So a team with like no point guard. So you could go to a rebuilding team. I know he's been like, I've actually had dinner with Mac McClung. I literally had dinner at the Capitol Grill with Mac McClung like a few months ago. Drank a bunch of wine with him, learned about his girl, hung out with him for like 2 hours, bro. Right? Like Mac like sees me and like say, "What's up, man?" But that's here nor there. Now, I think, and he was telling me, he's like, yeah, he can go to Europe whenever he wants and get a bag, but he wants to be in the NBA. Now, what team can do that? And bringing in a guy like Tyus Jones will probably push Mac McClung out, as he can't be a two-way guy anymore. And to me, I think the biggest thing here is just like finding an organization that's going to allow Tyus Jones or this Orlando obviously Mac McClung to play. But for this organization, they need to be a better three-point shooting team, one of the worst three-point shooting teams. And Tyus Jones would immediately be next to Desmond Bane and arguably Jace Richardson, one of your three best shooters on this team, which I think would pay its weight in gold. Because if you haven't been watching this team, they have been bad when it comes to shooting threes. And it's also being reported now that the Knicks are a team to watch for Mr. Tyus Jones. So this is a report that's coming from, and this was not expected. Okay, this is midway through the video. I also had like an itch right here. But Tyus Jones, according to Ian Begley of Sports NY, Tyus Jones is the name to keep on. They had mutual interest. Jones was even willing to take a pay cut to go there. So it seems like if Orlando is if they give him the money, the Knicks, which we all know what he would do there, he'd be their six-man scorer, be another point guard option there besides Deuce McBride behind Jalen Brunson, give him kind of a different look, which would really help out whoever ends up being their coach. And to me, I think that one does make a ton of sense if you're a Knicks fan. But yeah, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're a fan of either the Knicks or the Magic, if you're the Magic, do you think it's worth doing the salary cap gymnastics to get him? If you're the Knicks, would you guys try full court press to get Tyus Jones? Or really, you could take the pay cut and see like how his career bounces back next year. because I don't think he wants to lock himself into a long-term deal, which could be handicapping himself, as next year free agency is going to have a lot more money to spend, teams, or a lot more teams willing to spend next offseason because they'll have more salary cap room. So that's basically my whole thoughts on that one. What do you guys think? Alrighty, guys, if you've made it to the end, I've just checked everywhere to make sure that there is no other headlines coming in. And oh wow, the company is going to bring back college basketball. Wow. EA Sports, we'll just talk about this right now just because I care. And the Spurs log jam okay, guys. So it's supposedly DFS is going to be a guy who goes to the Rockets. That's what we're hearing. Wiggins in Milwaukee. I just think that's a really hard deal to do due to the fact that Milwaukee doesn't have anything to offer, and the only way you can salary match that deal is with Andrew Wiggins is by doing like a Pat Connaughton and Kyle Kuzma type package, and I just think that's terrible. Now, the logjam for San Antonio, Malik Brannon and Blake Wesley aren't going to be expected back, my guy. Sorry to tell you that one. And Deandre Ayton, Milwaukee, Lakers, or Warriors. I'd have to lean out of the three of them, Lakers, because Bill Duffy is the agent for Luka Doncic, and Bill Duffy is also the agent for DeAndre Ayton. And yeah, if you're a Thunders fan, you're doing a good job. Dude, I have like an itch on my ear right now. It's weird. But yeah, that's that. If you guys chilled for most of this, I really appreciate you guys. Let me know what you guys think of this like new little overlay that we did for the videos. As you guys saw, we would capture whatever we wanted to capture, showed it like this. I think I'm gonna have to resize these to be a little bit bigger. I'm gonna have to add, make them a bit more squared. But yeah, this is kind of the idea of like how I want to do videos now. Maybe obviously more pictures and stuff, but kind of this like slideshow-esque style with me to the right. I think it makes it seem a bit more professional. We can put our talking points to the left, show you guys things. You guys can also then zoom in on these. But yeah, I just think having, these animations maybe make it look a little bit better. But let me know your thoughts and what I should do. But that's it from today, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy. Until next time, peace out.